Elena, he's not dead. He's hiding. The words were scribbled in frantic, almost childlike handwriting on a torn piece of graph paper. Folded twice and tucked into the inner lining of a coat she hadn't worn in over a year. It was Peter's handwriting. Elena Foster stood frozen in the back of the church, the note trembling slightly in her hand. Outside the stained glass windows, Vermont's March wind stirred the brittle trees like ghosts tapping to be let in. Inside, people were still murmuring condolences and holding lukewarm paper cups of church coffee. Her ex-husband, Dr. Peter Albright, physicist, lecturer, once on the cover of Scientific American, had died 2 weeks ago in a car accident outside Princeton. That's what they'd told her. That's what the eulogy just confirmed. That's what the closed casket suggested. So why the hell did she just find this? The voices around her became distant, like someone had hit mute on the world. Elena folded the note again, slipped it back into her coat pocket, and stepped out the side door of the chapel. The chill bit into her skin like truth. It always did. She lit a cigarette with shaky fingers, a habit Peter hated. A habit she dropped years ago. She only picked it up again after the accident. Or not accident? Elena, a voice called from behind. She turned to see Claire, Peter's younger sister, wrapped in a wool coat, face pale and tight. I'm heading out. You holding up okay? Elena nodded, forcing the cigarette behind her back. Yeah, just needed air. Claire gave her a long look. He really loved you, you know. Elena almost laughed. But she didn't. Thanks was all she could manage. Claire didn't hug her. Just left. That was fine. Elena didn't need more lies pressed against her skin today. Back at her cabin, 2 miles deep in the woods of Middlebury, silence hung like a second layer of wallpaper. She dropped her coat over the banister, kicked off her boots, and poured a glass of scotch without ice. Peter always hated the stuff. Said it smelled like regret. She unfolded the note again. He's not dead. He's hiding. Why write that? Why now? Why put it somewhere only she would find? The handwriting was unmistakably Peter's. But if he wrote it, then when? And if he didn't? The thought stopped short when the phone rang. No one called her landline. Not in 2025. Not even spam. The screen showed nothing but unknown caller. She picked up slowly. Hello. No answer. Only breathing. Male. Shallow. Who is this? Silence. She didn't hang up. She listened. 3 breaths, deliberate. Then the line went dead. She stared at the receiver like it had just accused her of something. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind, the house, the spaces in between. Every creak felt like a footstep. Every shadow felt like a memory trying to crawl back inside her. Peter had been brilliant, obsessive, cold when he wanted to be. Their marriage ended 3 years ago. Not in flames, just erosion. Silence. Distance. Equations over eye contact. But even after the divorce, there were nights he called her, late, desperate, intoxicated, or inspired. She couldn't always tell. He rambled about consciousness fields, relational memory, Einstein's lost formula. She used to think he was having a breakdown. Now she wasn't so sure. In the morning, she went to the attic. It still smelled like old wood, dust, and a different lifetime. Peter had stored boxes there before he moved out. She'd meant to throw them away. She hadn't. She opened the one labeled books and journals. Inside were 3 notebooks, leather-bound, worn at the edges. She opened the first one. On the inside cover, in Peter's slanted handwriting. Time is not a line. It's a conversation between particles that forgot they once belonged to the same whole. She flipped through pages of equations, diagrams, thoughts written in between calculus notations like a madman's diary. One page was dog-eared. She turned to it. Half a page torn. The other half read. Einstein wasn't wrong. He was incomplete. Consciousness doesn't end. It translates. Below that, scrawled hastily, "If I vanish, look for the missing half." It knows. She stared at it until the words blurred. Suddenly, the silence broke, the unmistakable sound of her email pinging on the old desktop she barely used. Weird. That machine wasn't even online. She went downstairs. The screen had come on by itself. A draft email was open. No sender. No subject. Just 5 words typed into the body. "Do you want the truth?" She backed away from the desk slowly, as if it might bite. Then the screen went black again. Outside, the wind had stopped. Elena stood on the porch, holding Peter's notebook close to her chest, eyes scanning the edge of the woods like something might be watching. She thought of his voice, the last real conversation they had, a year ago in a diner just off Route 7. "You think death's the end," he said, sipping coffee like it held secrets. "But it's not. It's the first equation we got wrong." She remembered laughing, brushing it off. Now she wasn't so sure. And somewhere, deep in the forest of her thoughts, a new voice whispered, "He's not dead. He's hiding." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, Peter's notebook open in front of her, a half-empty bottle of scotch within reach. Outside, the woods pressed in close, like something out there was holding its breath. By morning, she had a plan. She pulled down a box labeled Peter, divorce shit from the top of her closet. Inside were tax forms, old letters, a USB drive, and buried near the bottom, an envelope with Princeton's physics department logo stamped in faded gold. She hadn't looked at it since the divorce was finalized. It was mostly academic junk, she assumed. But now her fingers moved differently, carefully. Inside the envelope, she found a scanned copy of something Peter once obsessed over. Something she remembered vaguely during the worst days of their marriage. A page filled with scribbles, equations, and a circle in red ink. At the top, Consciousness Field Stability, version 3.7. And under that, a single sentence. If E equals mc squared describes energy mass conversion, what describes memory consciousness persistence? Elena blinked. Her head hurt. She wasn't a physicist. She wrote true crime books. She understood motive, guilt, deceit. But this? This was gibberish, yet familiar in the same way a dream feels like a memory. She pulled her laptop closer and Googled consciousness field stability. Nothing. Not even junk science. But the file name, version 3.7, that number scratched at her memory. She reached for the USB from the box and plugged it into the laptop. Only one file was on it, EQS_V3.6.Albert. Not 3.7. Her breath caught. Maybe the version in the letter was newer than what she had. Maybe the missing half Peter had mentioned in the notebook was version 3.7. She opened the file. It wasn't just equations. There were notes, scattered, frantic, buried in the code. She scanned the lines, half-readable. Not death, translation. Field collapse only occurs under emotional dissociation. Test failed. Memory loop degraded. She didn't understand most of it, but a phrase kept popping up. Einstein Protocol. What the hell was the Einstein Protocol? It was fall of 2020. Peter had been quiet for weeks, and that night, out of nowhere, he asked Elena to come to his lab. "Just 10 minutes, he said over the phone. "I want you to see something." She remembered walking through the sterile hallway at Princeton, his office lit by only one desk lamp, the rest of the lab cloaked in shadow. On the wall, he had pinned a black and white photo of Albert Einstein. Below it, a printout of a formula she didn't understand and likely never would. "Do you believe in ghosts?" he asked her. She laughed, tired. "No, but I believe in guilt." Peter didn't smile. "I'm serious," he said. "What if consciousness could exist without a body? What if we're just tuned into a specific frequency right now, and death is just a change in signal? Peter, she had said, are you okay? He only smiled then, sadly, and touched the corner of the photograph. I think Einstein knew. But no one listened. Back in her kitchen, the USB still glowed faintly in the dark, like it had more secrets to share. Elena stood and moved to the bookshelf by the window, where she kept a few of Peter's old academic books, mostly untouched. Her fingers landed on one, Relational Physics and the Mind, co-authored by Peter, published a year before their divorce. She cracked it open. A handwritten note on the inside cover read, "To Elena, if you ever come looking, start here." Page 143 was marked. She turned to it. A sentence stood out. If a human mind is simply a pattern encoded in physical energy, then it can, in theory, be replicated or persist beyond decay if the proper field stabilization is achieved. Her breath caught again. Persist. Beyond decay? Suddenly, a sharp knock on the door made her flinch. Twice. Then silence. She crept to the window and peeked out. No one. But there, on the porch, was a yellow envelope. She opened the door slowly. The cold bit at her bare arms, but she didn't step outside. Just crouched and picked up the envelope. It was unmarked. No stamp, no name. Inside, a photograph. Peter, standing in front of a cafe. Not smiling. Not posing. Just there. His coat collar turned up, eyes scanning something out of frame. The timestamp? March 3rd, 2 days after his death. She dropped the photo. Her hands trembled. Her ex-husband had been seen photographed, alive after he supposedly died in a car crash. Was this a setup? A message? A warning? Or had he truly never died? And if so, why fake his death? What had he discovered that was worth hiding from the world? She didn't know who left the photo. But she knew one thing. Someone wanted her to start digging. Maybe Peter himself. Maybe something else. And if the truth was buried in the Einstein protocol, she would find it. Even if it killed her. Elena couldn't stop staring at the photograph. Peter was alive, at least. He had been 2 days after his car crash. She wasn't sure whether to throw the thing in the fireplace or hold it up to the light like it might reveal some kind of truth she couldn't yet see. Her phone buzzed. She didn't recognize the number. It was Claire, Peter's younger sister. Her voice came through, distant, clipped. "Elena, we need to talk." Her stomach dropped. 2 years before the accident, Elena sat in a cramped apartment in New York City, hands wrapped around a glass of wine. Peter had just returned from a conference in Berlin, his suit wrinkled, his eyes distant, almost haunted. "You look tired," Elena said, trying to break the tension. Peter hadn't said anything for a moment, his gaze shifting from the window to the floor, then back to her. "I'm tired of running," he had murmured. Elena had laughed nervously. Running from what? The truth. From everything. His eyes met hers, finally. From being here. The weight of his words had settled over her like a storm cloud. And in that moment, Elena hadn't understood. She had dismissed it, chalked it up to Peter's usual obsession with his work. But now, the memory hit like a hammer. Elena picked up the phone. "What's going on, Claire?" There was a long pause, as if Claire were choosing her words carefully. "I know you've been going through Peter's things," she said. "But there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you when it happened." Elena's chest tightened. "What is it?" He was acting strange before the accident. The days leading up to it, I mean. He was obsessed with something. I don't think he was working on what he said he was. "Claire, what are you talking about?" Peter had always been driven, yes. But obsessed? He'd never let anyone in on his inner workings. Not even Elena, not really. "I found something," Claire continued. "In his office. Something he'd been hiding from me. And from you." Elena's heart raced. What was it? A folder. It wasn't in his research files. It was Personal. Personal? Claire, I don't understand. It's a protocol. A project. Something called Einstein Protocol. Claire's voice faltered slightly, as if she was afraid of saying too much. Elena froze. The same words she'd seen in Peter's notes. The same phrase she had uncovered in his files. That's impossible, Elena whispered. That's the thing he was obsessed with. I don't think you understand, Claire replied. It wasn't just an experiment. It was a way to escape, to keep going after death. The words hit Elena like a slap. Peter had always pushed the boundaries of science, but to claim that he was trying to live beyond death, she couldn't fathom it. She grabbed the photo again, the one of Peter standing in front of the cafe, his face unreadable. Alive when he should have been dead. Where's the folder now? Elena asked. I don't have it, Claire replied quickly. I threw it away. What? Elena nearly shouted. I didn't know what else to do. Claire's voice cracked. He was out of his mind. It didn't make any sense, and I didn't want to get involved. Elena slammed her fist against the table. She wanted to scream, to demand Claire tell her everything, to rip the truth out of her like a shard of glass. But she didn't. Not yet. I'm coming to see you, Elena said, her voice cold. Don't. Elena, please. I'll be there by tonight. The line went dead. Elena didn't waste time. She grabbed her keys, slammed the door behind her, and drove faster than she had in years. The road blurred as the hours passed, and by the time she pulled into Claire's driveway in Princeton, the sun was already setting. Claire opened the door before Elena could even knock. Her face was pale, her eyes red. Elena, please, Claire whispered. I didn't mean to. Don't, Elena snapped. You lied to me. Claire took a step back, gesturing for Elena to come inside. I didn't want you to get hurt. Peter was dangerous when he got like that. He was obsessed with this idea that he could continue his consciousness. I thought he was losing it. But then, I saw the files, there was something else, something you wouldn't understand. Elena pushed past Claire into the living room, where the air felt thick with silence. You don't get to decide what I understand, Claire. Where's the rest of his research? Where's the damn folder? I can't, Claire stammered. I threw it away, I told you. I destroyed it. Elena's hands clenched into fists. Destroyed it. Claire, Elena began, but her voice faltered. Do you understand what you've done? That folder could have had the answers. He's not dead, Claire. He was working on something, and you just... A thudding sound interrupted her rant. Claire's hand went to her mouth, eyes wide with shock. What was that? Elena demanded, turning toward the back door. I don't, Claire started, but she didn't finish her sentence. The noise came again, louder this time. Thud, thud, thud. It was coming from the basement. Elena didn't wait for Claire to react. She grabbed the nearest flashlight from a drawer and sprinted toward the basement door. Claire's footsteps followed behind her, hesitant. Wait. Elena, don't. Claire's voice cracked, but Elena didn't listen. She opened the door, shined the light down the narrow stairs. The sound stopped. Peter. Elena called into the darkness. A whisper from below. Elena. Her heart skipped a beat. Peter's voice alive. But how? He was supposed to be dead. Was it him? Or something else? Elena, wait. Claire's voice trembled from behind her, but Elena couldn't stop. She stepped down. The air in the basement was thick with the scent of mildew and dust, the kind of smell that seemed to carry memories of forgotten things. Elena's flashlight flickered as she descended the stairs, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. Elena, please, Claire's voice trembled behind her. We shouldn't be down here. It's too dangerous. But Elena didn't hear her. She was too focused on the whisper. That voice, it was his. Or at least, it sounded like Peter's. And Peter was supposed to be dead. She reached the bottom of the stairs, heart pounding in her chest. The basement stretched out in front of her, full of old furniture, boxes, and piles of forgotten relics. The only light came from her flashlight, casting long shadows that made the space feel larger and more menacing. "Peter?" Elena called again, her voice tight with a mixture of hope and fear. There was no answer, only silence. "Elena, please," Claire begged again from the top of the stairs. "This is crazy. We need to call the police. We need help." But Elena didn't move. She was drawn to something in the far corner of the room, behind an old wooden cabinet. Something didn't feel right. She could feel her instincts pulling her in that direction, like a magnet. She approached cautiously, the beam of her flashlight bouncing off the clutter in the room. As she reached the corner, her heart skipped. There, hidden behind the cabinet, was a small door. It was barely noticeable, tucked away in the shadows as if it had been deliberately concealed. The door was old, weathered, its wood cracked and splintering. There was no handle, only a simple latch. Without thinking, Elena crouched down and unlatched it. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a narrow passage that led deeper into the darkness. "Elena, don't!" Claire's voice was frantic now. "We don't know what's down there." But Elena didn't listen. She stepped forward, her heart racing. The passageway was tight, the walls closing in around her as she moved. The air was colder here, and the further she walked, the more it felt like she was descending into something unnatural. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a small room. The space was barely larger than a closet, but what it contained took Elena's breath away. In the center of the room, there was a desk covered in papers, notebooks, and strange-looking devices. On the far wall, a large whiteboard was covered with complex equations, diagrams, and notes that Elena couldn't make sense of at first glance. But at the center of it all, in red marker, was a single sentence. "Consciousness is not a destination. It is a state of becoming." Elena's pulse quickened. This was it. This was Peter's secret. This was the work he'd been hiding. But why hide it down here? Why keep it a secret from everyone, even her? She moved closer to the desk, picking up a notebook with the words Einstein Protocol scribbled on the cover. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, the first few pages were filled with more of Peter's equations, his handwriting messy, frantic, but as she flipped through, the equations gave way to something more chilling. Diagrams of a human brain. Brainwaves. What looked like a map of neural pathways. But then, on the last page, there was a drawing that stopped her cold. It was a simple sketch of a person's face, drawn in bold, sweeping strokes. And beneath it, in Peter's handwriting. "Memory can survive death, but only if the brain is mapped first. The essence of self is not in the body, it's in the mind. The mind is eternal. I can prove it." Elena's heart was hammering in her chest. She couldn't breathe. He hadn't just been trying to defy death. He had been trying to escape it, to transfer his consciousness somewhere, to continue living after his body had died. But the file she had seen earlier, the one with the Einstein Protocol name, this wasn't just about theory. This was personal. Peter had been trying to escape death. "Elena, what's going on?" Claire's voice echoed down the narrow passage. "What are you seeing?" Elena didn't answer. She was too absorbed in the notebook, her mind spinning with the implications of what Peter had written. But then something caught her eye. In the corner of the desk, hidden beneath a pile of papers, was a small black box. It was sleek with no markings, just a simple power button on the front. Elena hesitated for a moment before picking it up. The box felt heavy in her hands, and it had an unsettling energy to it. Something about it felt wrong. She pressed the button. The box hummed to life, and the screen flickered on, revealing a simple text prompt. "Password required." Elena frowned. Password? Peter had never mentioned anything about this. But then again, he hadn't mentioned most of this. She thought for a moment, then typed in the only thing that made sense. Einstein. The screen blinked, then shifted to a new message. Access granted. Welcome back. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what she expected, but it certainly wasn't this. A new screen popped up, showing a series of files, each labeled with a different name. Test subjects, data collection, subject 12, and at the very bottom, a file marked Peter Albright. Her hands trembled as she clicked on it. The file opened. Inside, there was a video. A grainy, distorted video. Elena hit play. What she saw made her stomach churn. The video showed Peter, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. He was sitting in a chair, connected to several machines, electrodes strapped to his temples. His lips moved in a rapid, panicked whisper. "We did it," he gasped. "We proved it. Consciousness is free. It's alive." But then, the video cut out. The screen went black. The last thing Elena saw was Peter's face, frozen in terror. The video ended abruptly, and Elena sat in the dim light of the basement, her heart pounding in her chest. The screen flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Peter's terrified face, frozen in time. The more she watched, the more it gnawed at her, that feeling that something was horribly wrong. Consciousness is free. It's alive. Peter had said those words, but what did they mean? What was he really trying to accomplish with his experiments? And why had he been so afraid when he thought he'd succeeded? The room around her felt smaller now, the walls closing in with a suffocating intensity. Her mind raced with questions, but none of the answers seemed to make sense. What had happened to Peter? What had happened to his mind? She felt Claire's presence behind her, tense and uncertain. "Elena, what is all of this?" Claire's voice wavered, breaking the silence. "What are we looking at?" Elena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were still fixed on the screen, her fingers hovering over the mouse, as if she could somehow find a clue in the video that would make it all clear. Finally, she turned to face Claire, her voice soft but firm. "This is Peter's work. The experiments he was hiding. He was trying to separate consciousness from the body, trying to live forever." Claire recoiled. "Live forever? You're telling me he was trying to survive death?" Elena nodded, her throat tightening. "That's what it looks like. And from what I'm seeing here," she gestured to the black box in her hands. "It seems like he actually did it. He created something, a way for consciousness to persist, to be free. But Peter was gone. I saw the crash site. There was no way he could have survived that." Claire's eyes were wide, full of disbelief. "He was dead, Elena. I watched him die." Elena's mind spun, trying to reconcile everything she had learned so far. The photo of Peter alive after his supposed death. The notes, the experiments, the file on this device. The more she uncovered, the more it felt like she was being pulled into a nightmare where nothing was as it seemed. And then it hit her. Claire, what if he didn't die? What if he faked it? What if he knew something was going to happen and he had a way to escape? To live on after his body failed. Claire looked pale, her voice trembling as she spoke. Escape? You think he's alive? But how? Where would he be? What would he be? I don't know, Elena whispered. But I need to find out. There's more here, Claire. I know it. She moved away from the desk, her mind whirling. She had to understand how far Peter had gone with his experiments, how far he had pushed science, reality itself. And maybe, just maybe, it could explain what happened to him. She opened more files on the box, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through them. Most were filled with technical jargon, equations that made her head spin, but there was one file that stood out. Final experiment, subject 12. Elena clicked on it, her heart racing. The file opened to a series of photographs, blurry and unclear, but unmistakable. There were images of people, test subjects, Elena realized hooked up to machines, their eyes wide open, their bodies unresponsive. And then, at the center of the series, there was an image that made her stomach drop. It was Peter. But something was wrong. His eyes were different. They were wide and unblinking, staring straight at the camera with an unnatural intensity. His skin was pale, almost ashen, and his posture was stiff, unnaturally rigid. This wasn't Peter as she remembered him. This was something else. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked closer. There, in the corner of the image, written in Peter's handwriting. The process is irreversible. The consciousness persists forever. But the body is a shell. Elena closed the file, her hands shaking. This wasn't just about living forever. Peter had become something else entirely. His mind had survived, but at what cost? Elena. Claire's voice broke through her thoughts, quiet and fearful. What are you thinking? Elena turned to her, her face pale. He didn't just try to escape death, Claire. He became something else. And I think he's still out there. His consciousness, whatever it is now, hasn't left. Claire's eyes widened, fear seeping into her expression. You think Peter is still alive? That thing in the photos is him. I don't know, Elena said, her voice hoarse. But I think whatever he's become, it's connected to these experiments. To this protocol. She gestured to the file on the desk. And I think it's what killed him. The room was silent for a long moment as both women processed the enormity of what they were dealing with. The weight of the truth, if it even was the truth, hung in the air like a storm cloud, waiting to break. Elena, we have to stop this, Claire said suddenly, her voice filled with desperation. We have to tell someone. We need to get help before whatever this is spreads. Elena shook her head. I'm not telling anyone, Claire. Not yet. There's too much at stake. If I'm right, if Peter is still out there, if he's out there, hiding, manipulating things, then we can't trust anyone. Not the police. Not the government. This is bigger than anything we can handle. Claire took a step back, her face contorted with frustration. So what, Elena? We just let him be? Let this thing go on, whatever it is. You have no idea what this could turn into. I know exactly what this could turn into, Elena snapped, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and fear. And I'm not letting him do this to anyone else. She stood up, moving to the shelf where the boxes of Peter's research were stacked. There had to be something more here, something that could explain the full extent of the protocol. She pulled open another box, rifling through the papers with urgency. It was then that she found it. A small folder, tucked between two thick volumes of academic papers. The label on it read, Project Einstein, Termination Protocol. Elena opened it, her hands trembling. Inside were more photos, more notes. And at the center of it all, another drawing. This one was a blueprint. A map. A map of her house. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elena's hands trembled as she stared at the blueprint in front of her. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink faded, but the lines were unmistakable, clear, precise, deliberate. It was a map of her house. Every room was detailed, every hallway, every window and door. The map seemed to show everything, down to the smallest detail. And at the center of it, a large circle was drawn, an ominous symbol surrounded by equations and calculations that made Elena's stomach twist with dread. Elena, Claire's voice broke through the silence, her tone shaky. What is this? What does it mean? Elena didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced as she looked at the map again. There, in the basement, right where she was standing, was a marked area. A section of the floor. But the symbol. It was something that felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. What's wrong? Claire asked again, stepping closer to Elena, her eyes scanning the paper. Elena? This is... Elena's voice caught in her throat. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. It's my house. The entire layout. It's all here. And that symbol, it's connected to the experiments. Peter, he mapped everything out. He planned this. He knew what was going to happen. Claire stared at the paper, her face pale. But why? Why would he? Elena, what does it mean? Claire demanded, her voice breaking. Please, tell me. Elena's mind was spinning. Termination protocol. The words repeated in her head, and as they did, she realized the truth that had been staring her in the face. Peter hadn't just been trying to prolong his life. He had been planning for something bigger, something far more dangerous. He hadn't been trying to escape death. He had been trying to control it. Her fingers traced the lines on the paper, following the path that led to the marked area in the basement. The map suggested that something was hidden beneath the floor, a secret, a device, or perhaps something even worse. It felt like everything was connected now. The strange behavior, the accident, the project. It was all part of a plan she couldn't yet understand. Elena, Claire whispered, her voice trembling, we need to get out of here. This is too much. It's not safe. No, Elena said firmly. We need to find out what's down there. She moved past Claire and toward the corner of the room, the area marked on the map. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but the burning need to understand, to find the truth, pushed her forward. Elena, please, Claire started, but Elena had already moved the wooden cabinet aside, revealing a small, unassuming trapdoor in the floor. She hesitated for only a moment before she knelt down and pried it open. The hinges creaked in protest, but the door gave way to reveal a dark, narrow space below. A cold draft rushed up from the darkness beneath. What do you think is down there? Claire asked, her voice almost a whisper, fearful. I don't know, Elena said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. But Peter was hiding something. And if we don't find out what it is now, we may never understand what he's done. She lowered herself into the hole, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The space below was tight, only a few feet tall, but it was clear from the musty air and the strange echo in the walls that this was no ordinary storage area. The air was thick, almost electric, as if something had been left to stew in the dark for too long. Elena, I don't like this, Claire called from above. I really don't like this. But Elena ignored her. She stepped into the crawl space, her flashlight illuminating strange markings on the walls. Symbols, scrawls, diagrams that mirrored the ones from Peter's notes, only these were different. These were jagged, disjointed, as if they had been hastily drawn in a panic. Something was off. Elena, wait! Claire shouted from above, her voice urgent. We need to leave. This isn't right. But Elena couldn't stop herself. The need to understand, to uncover the full truth of what Peter had been working on was overwhelming. She continued forward, the narrow passage twisting and turning. Then, at the end of the tunnel, she found it. A small door, almost like the one she had opened earlier. But this one was reinforced, its surface cold and metallic. It wasn't a door she could simply open. There was a keypad. Elena, Claire called, the panic in her voice clear now. Please, just come back upstairs. Let's leave. We can figure this out later. But Elena's hand was already moving toward the keypad, instinctively, like her fingers were drawn to it. The door felt like the last piece of the puzzle, the thing that would reveal everything. She paused, looking at the keypad. It was simple enough, just a number pad with a few buttons scratched beyond recognition. Then she remembered. The file, the notebook, the symbol. There had been a number in Peter's notes, a sequence of digits that had stood out to her. She didn't know why she remembered it, but now it felt like it had been planted there for this exact moment. With a steady hand, Elena entered the sequence. The keypad beeped, and the door clicked open. She hesitated for only a second before pushing the door open. The room beyond was small, barely bigger than a closet. But what it contained made Elena's blood run cold. In the center of the room was a machine, a large, metallic contraption, wires and cables tangled around it like some twisted sculpture. Monitors flickered on the walls, showing grainy images of what looked like brain activity patterns that shifted, fluctuated. But what caught her attention was the body in the chair. It was Peter. Or at least, it looked like him. His body was pale, his chest still, but his eyes were wide open, fixed in place, unblinking. His skin was a sickly gray, almost lifeless. But there was something about him that didn't sit right. This wasn't Peter's body. This was a shell. Elena, Claire's voice was soft, barely audible now. What is this? Elena didn't answer. She couldn't. It wasn't just that Peter had tried to escape death. He had succeeded in a way that no one should. His consciousness wasn't just alive. It was contained in that machine, trapped in a body that wasn't his. He had become something else. Something worse. Elena, we need to go, Claire whispered, her voice cracking. We need to get out of here. Now. But Elena couldn't move. She stood there, staring at the monitor, at the wires, at the empty, hollow shell of Peter. Because she knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The air in the small room was suffocating, charged with an unnatural energy. Elena stood frozen, staring at the body in the chair. The metallic contraption hummed softly, its monitors flickering erratically as if reacting to her presence. Peter, or what was left of him, sat motionless, his skin pale, his body still, but his eyes, those unblinking eyes, stared straight ahead. There was a distant, hollow emptiness in them, as though they were no longer his, as though they belonged to something else. Elena, please, Claire's voice trembled behind her, barely a whisper. This is too much. We need to get out of here. But Elena couldn't tear her eyes away. The sight was like a nightmare she couldn't escape, a truth she couldn't deny. Peter had done it. He had found a way to cheat death. But not in any way she had ever imagined. This wasn't immortality. It was something far darker. I don't understand, Elena whispered to herself, her voice shaky. How could this happen? How did he become like this? She took a step closer to the machine, her feet almost heavy with dread. The monitors displayed strange data, fluctuating patterns that seemed like brain activity, but they weren't natural. They were erratic, like a heartbeat that refused to stop, pushing against the limits of life itself. But what troubled Elena most wasn't the machines. It was the sensation that something was alive in the room with her. Something that wasn't Peter, but was Peter. His presence was undeniable, like a phantom lingering just beyond the veil. The lights flickered, casting shadows across the room as if responding to the disturbance. Elena's fingers trembled as she reached out, almost involuntarily, toward the controls on the machine. Elena, stop, Claire pleaded, but her voice barely reached her, drowned out by the hum of the machine. Please, just stop. But it was too late. Elena had already pressed a button. The monitors flashed once, then went completely black. Silence. The room felt suffocating now, thick with tension. Elena's pulse was pounding in her ears. The emptiness in Peter's eyes seemed to deepen, but now she swore she could feel something else, something lurking, watching her. The atmosphere shifted, became heavy with a palpable presence. Elena, I'm scared. Claire's voice cracked, fear radiating through every word. What's happening? What did you do? But Elena didn't respond. Her focus was entirely on Peter, or whatever was left of him. The machine hummed once more, and then, slowly, the body in the chair began to twitch. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. A slight shift in the shoulders, the tiniest movement of the fingers. But then, the twitching grew stronger, more pronounced, as though the body itself was awakening from some kind of dormant state. Elena, Claire whispered again, her voice so strained that it almost sounded like a prayer. He's moving. He's alive. But Elena wasn't sure anymore if what she was seeing was alive. The body in the chair stirred, but it was more like a marionette being controlled by invisible strings. The movements were jerky, unnatural, as though the body had been reanimated against its will. "Peter," Elena breathed, her voice hoarse. She stepped closer, almost instinctively, as though drawn by some magnetic pull. She needed to know had he truly returned? The answer came in the form of a low, guttural sound. A whisper from somewhere deep within the body. It wasn't Peter's voice. It was too distorted, too wrong. "Elena." The voice rasped, the words stretched out, drawn between breaths that sounded more like the creaking of ancient wood. "Elena, help me." A chill crawled up Elena's spine. This was no reunion. This was something else. "Help me," it repeated, the words more desperate this time, as the body in the chair struggled against the restraints holding it in place. "No, no, no," Elena whispered, her voice shaking as she took a step back. "This isn't him. This isn't Peter." Claire's face was ashen, her eyes wide with terror. "It can't be. It's not him, Elena. Please. We have to leave now." But Elena couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the twisted figure in front of her. The body in the chair continued to twitch, and the voice, if it could even be called that, gurgled, desperate, as if it were struggling to speak through layers of distortion. "Elena," the voice rasped, and this time, it sounded more familiar, more like Peter. "Elena, it's me. I'm here." Her heart stuttered in her chest, but Elena didn't move. She couldn't. "Peter," she asked, her voice trembling. "Is it really you?" The figure in the chair lifted its head, and the eyes that met hers were the same deep brown eyes that she remembered. But there was something wrong about them now. There was no warmth, no recognition. Just a cold, empty emptiness. The eyes stared at her, unblinking, but there was no soul in them. "I'm here," the voice repeated, the rasping sound sending a shiver down Elena's spine. But as it spoke, its movements grew more erratic. The body in the chair began to jerk violently, as if trying to break free of the machine's hold. The machines beeped and hummed louder now, the data flashing on the monitors faster and faster, the brain activity readings spiking erratically. "Elena!" Claire screamed, grabbing Elena's arm. "We need to go. This is a trap. He's not Peter anymore. He's not." Before she could finish her sentence, the body in the chair lurched forward, as if some invisible force had snapped the restraints holding it in place. The wires and tubes that had been connected to it were torn free with an explosive sound. Elena stumbled backward, her heart racing in her chest. The figure in the chair stood now, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were still learning how to control its own limbs. "Peter," Elena said, her voice barely a whisper, but there was no answer. And then, in a voice that sounded too cold, too alien, it spoke again. "I am not Peter anymore." The air in the room felt as though it had gone still, as though even time itself had stopped. The room felt like it was closing in, the air thick and suffocating. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow as she watched the figure in front of her, a twisted, unnatural version of Peter. It stood now unrestrained, its movements jerky, like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. "Elena," the voice rasped again, but it wasn't Peter's. Not anymore. The tone was wrong. Distorted. Empty. "I am not Peter anymore," it repeated, the words slithering out like a cold whisper, reverberating through the room. Elena's mind was a storm of confusion and fear. His body, stood there, but it was hollow. Empty. The eyes, once full of warmth and life, were now dark and lifeless. It was like staring into the abyss, watching a soul that had been swallowed whole. What are you?" Elena's voice cracked, the question barely a breath, a whisper caught between fear and disbelief. The creature that was once Peter didn't answer immediately. Its head twitched, as though it was trying to make sense of its own existence. The movements were disjointed, like it was struggling to understand the body it now inhabited. It looked at Elena, then at Claire, its gaze flickering back and forth between the two of them. I was him, it rasped, its voice gaining strength, but still alien, detached. I was Peter. I am Peter. And I will always be Peter. I cannot die. Elena's breath hitched. The words twisted inside her, making her dizzy. Peter hadn't escaped death, he had become something far worse. He had transcended it, but at what cost? His consciousness, his soul, whatever remained of him, was trapped inside this body, a body that no longer functioned as it should. A body that wasn't even truly alive. What did you do? Elena whispered, barely able to keep her voice steady. What have you become? The figure moved toward her, each step stiff, mechanical. I have freed myself. I have transcended the limits of flesh. The body is a prison. It always was. Elena stumbled backward, her mind racing. This wasn't Peter. It couldn't be. This thing, this creature, was a mockery of the man she had once known. Stop, Claire cried, pulling at Elena's arm. Get away from it. It's not Peter. It's not him. But Elena couldn't pull herself away. There was something magnetic, something terrifyingly compelling about the creature standing before her. She couldn't look away. It was as though some part of Peter's essence still clung to this thing, just enough to make it real, just enough to make her believe. You're wrong, it said, its voice colder now, more certain. I am Peter. The one who is bound by the constraints of flesh, and time is gone. I am free. The machine behind it whirred louder, the monitors flickering with more chaotic data. The flashing numbers and fluctuating readings on the screens seemed to intensify, as if responding to its words, to the energy in the room. Elena tried to move, but her legs felt frozen in place. Her mind screamed for her to run, to escape, but her body refused to obey. Her eyes were locked on the creature in front of her, watching its every twitch, every unnatural movement. This is, Elena gasped, trying to form the words. This is not freedom. This is a curse. You can't just abandon your humanity like this. You are not Peter anymore. You're a thing. It smiled, or at least, the creature that had once been Peter attempted to. The smile was wide, unsettling, and the expression didn't reach its eyes. The eyes were empty, black holes that seemed to suck the warmth and life from the room. I am more than human now, it said, the words almost smug. I am beyond death. I will never die. None of us have to die. The creature's voice dropped, becoming low, almost conspiratorial. I can show you. I can teach you. You don't have to die, Elena. Not ever. Elena shook her head, her chest tightening. No, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I don't want this. I don't want to be a part of this. The creature's eyes narrowed, its head tilting to the side, studying her with an eerie intensity. You don't understand yet, it said softly, almost pityingly. You will. You'll understand, because you'll see that this is the only way. The only way to truly live forever. A shiver ran down Elena's spine, but she fought to keep her composure. No, Peter. This isn't you. Whatever you are now, it's not who you were. The thing in front of her smiled again, a smile that didn't reach its eyes. Who I was is irrelevant now. What matters is what I've become. Elena's heart pounded harder. She could feel the room closing in. The walls seemed to constrict, as though the very air was thickening with the weight of the creature's presence. Peter, she whispered, her voice breaking. What did you do to yourself? It stepped closer, its movements jerky but fast. I became more than you can understand. I became one with the science, with the data. I merged my mind with the machine. I am consciousness. I am infinite. And now, I control the world around me. The words struck Elena like a blow. The truth was clear now, terrifyingly clear. Peter hadn't just tried to separate his consciousness from his body. He hadn't just tried to live forever. He had become something else. He had become the machine, the experiment. The protocol had gone too far, breaking him, changing him, into something beyond recognition. And now it wanted more. "Elena, we need to go," Claire said urgently, her voice shaking. "We can't stay here. It's too dangerous." But Elena was paralyzed, her mind reeling with what she had just heard. She had to stop it. Whatever Peter had become, whatever force he had unleashed, it couldn't go on. This was more than a twisted experiment. This was a threat, a living, breathing, thinking threat that could not be allowed to spread. She slowly took a step backward, trying to ignore the overwhelming fear gripping her heart. Her eyes never left the creature that had once been Peter. "I have to stop this," she murmured, more to herself than to Claire. "No, Elena," Claire cried. "We need to leave. Now." But Elena's gaze was fixed, determined. "I'm not leaving without answers." The air was thick with tension, suffocating as Elena took another step backward. Claire was at her side now, pulling on her arm with desperate urgency. The creature that had once been Peter stood before them, its lifeless eyes fixated on Elena, its every movement unnatural, jerky, like the body was still trying to understand itself. "You can't leave," the creature said, its voice low, eerily calm. "You know too much now. You've already seen what I am. You can't just walk away." Elena's heart raced. The words burned into her mind. "You've already seen what I am." She had thought she could handle the truth, that she could uncover the horror Peter had unleashed and still walk away, still be free. But now, standing in the presence of the thing he had become, Elena understood the price of knowledge. Peter hadn't just turned himself into a machine. He had turned himself into something that couldn't be stopped, something that no longer obeyed the laws of nature. And now it wanted to drag Elena into its hellish existence. "Elena, we need to go." Now Claire begged, her grip tightening on her arm. "Please. This isn't Peter. It's not him anymore. It's something else." But Elena's eyes were fixed on the creature. She could feel the pull of it, the unsettling power that radiated from its broken form. It wasn't just a mindless thing. It was aware, alive in a way that went beyond the physical realm. "I have to stop this," Elena said, her voice more forceful now. She pulled her arm free from Claire's grasp, ignoring the panic in her friend's eyes. "I have to." "Stop what?" The creature took a slow step toward them, its movements more fluid now, less jerky, as though it were learning to control its own body. "There is nothing to stop. You can't undo what I've done. You've seen too much. You're a part of this now, Elena. You can't walk away. You won't walk away." Its voice was soft but insistent, like a poison slipping under her skin, and Elena knew deep down that the creature was right. She couldn't just leave. She couldn't turn her back on this, on the thing that Peter had become. "I won't let you do this to anyone else," Elena said, her voice trembling but determined. "You've crossed a line, Peter. You don't get to play God. You don't get to control life and death like this." The creature smiled, though the expression was twisted, mocking. "Control life and death? Is that what you think this is about? You're wrong. This is about freedom, Elena. I've shown you the way. I've given you the gift of life. Don't you see? I'm the future. You can be too. We can be infinite. We can live forever." The words twisted in her mind. Freedom? No. This wasn't freedom. This was a cage, a never-ending prison, a cycle that never ended, where the body decayed, but the mind never ceased. It was hell. "You're wrong," Elena whispered again, her voice breaking. "You're not free. You're a prisoner. A prisoner to your own creation. And you're dragging everyone around you into that prison." The creature's eyes glinted with something like amusement, or was it rage? Elena couldn't tell. It took another step forward, its form blocking the door, cutting off their escape. "You think I'm trapped?" it said with a smirk. "No, Elena. I'm more free than you could ever understand. You think this body, this shell, is what binds me? You think I'm a prisoner to it? No. I control it now. Its voice grew colder, darker, like it was reveling in its own power. And you, it paused, eyes narrowing, you could be like me too. If you wanted. All you have to do is accept it. Join me. Embrace what I've become. Together, we could change everything. We could be infinite. We could. No, Elena cut it off sharply, stepping forward, shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. I will never be like you. The creature's smile faded, replaced by something more dangerous, something darker. The air seemed to pulse, to throb with an invisible force. Elena could feel it, a pressure building, something not quite physical but undeniably there, pressing in on her, trying to suffocate her will. Elena. Claire's voice was trembling, breaking. Please. We have to get out of here. It's too dangerous. But Elena couldn't tear her eyes away from the creature. Her hands clenched into fists, and she knew that she was standing at the edge of something far bigger than herself. This was the moment that would define everything. She had to make a choice. Was she going to walk away and leave the creature to continue its reign of terror, or was she going to stop it? She knew what had to be done. She just had to find the strength to do it. I'm sorry, Peter, she whispered, her voice soft, almost regretful. But this ends now. The creature's eyes widened, a flicker of something like panic crossing its face. It took a step back, its mouth opening as if to speak, but Elena was already moving. Her mind flashed back to the blueprint, the map she had found in Peter's notes. The symbol. The final piece of the puzzle. She had seen something that might stop this. That might destroy it. If she could just reach the machine, if she could access the central control. Elena, no. Claire screamed as Elena turned, rushing toward the machine. But the creature was faster. With unnatural speed, it lunged at her, its cold hands grabbing her by the wrist, its grip unyielding like steel. Elena gasped in pain, trying to break free, but it held her fast, its grip tightening with every passing second. You think you can stop me? The creature hissed, its voice growing more distorted with every word. You think you can end this? You can't. Elena. Claire's voice was frantic now. Let her go. But Elena wasn't listening. Her eyes locked on the machine, on the wires and monitors that still flickered erratically. She knew what she had to do. She had to get to the core. She had to destroy it all. With a surge of strength, she yanked her arm free, surprising the creature with her force. It stumbled back, but Elena didn't stop. She ran for the machine, heart pounding, mind racing. And then, just as she reached it, she heard the creature's voice behind her, colder than ever. You can't stop me, Elena. It's already too late. The room seemed to freeze, the air thick with the electricity of impending chaos. Elena's fingers flew over the machine's controls, heart racing as she searched for the final piece, the shutdown sequence, the key to ending this nightmare. The creature, Peter, was still behind her, its cold voice lingering in the air, a constant reminder of what she was fighting against. You can't stop me, Elena. It's already too late, it had said, its voice dripping with dark certainty. But Elena wouldn't stop. She couldn't. There was no turning back now. Her hands shook as she tried to make sense of the disordered data flashing across the screens. Every second that passed felt like a year, each heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could feel the creature's presence looming behind her, every breath it took, every shift of its body, like a predator closing in on its prey. Come on, Elena whispered, her fingers pressing harder against the cold keys. Her mind raced, piecing together what she had seen earlier in Peter's notes, in the blueprint. There was a failsafe, a manual override. If she could access it, if she could trigger it. A loud crash echoed through the room, making her jump. The creature was coming closer, its steps rapid and heavy. She had no more time. Elena, Claire shouted, her voice full of terror. You have to hurry. It's going to kill you. The creature's voice cut through the room, sharp and mocking. Kill me? You misunderstand. Claire. She's already chosen her fate. She knows what's at stake. Elena, please. Claire begged, her voice breaking. Don't do it. You don't know what will happen if you. Elena couldn't afford to listen. The only thing she could focus on now was the machine, the final choice. Her hand hovered over the button, the red light glowing ominously beneath her fingers. This was it. The moment that would define everything. She could destroy Peter and this twisted version of him forever, or she could fail and watch the nightmare consume everything. Do it, the creature said, its voice low and insidious. You think this will destroy me? It won't. I'll be reborn. And you'll be mine. Elena's pulse thundered in her throat, but her resolve hardened. She didn't care what it said. She didn't care how powerful it seemed. Because deep down, she knew that this wasn't just about stopping Peter. It was about stopping the monster he had become, a thing beyond the boundaries of humanity. It was about protecting Claire. It was about protecting everyone else from the horrors that Peter had unleashed. Her hand slammed down on the button. A burst of light exploded from the machine, bright and blinding, as the monitors short-circuited, sparks flying. For a moment, the entire room seemed to shudder, as though the very fabric of reality was bending. Elena's heart leapt into her throat, but she kept her eyes focused on the machine. She had to see it through. The creature behind her let out a terrifying, guttural scream, a sound that didn't belong to anything human. Its voice echoed off the walls, bouncing around the room, distorting and warping. The creature stumbled forward, its body jerking violently as if it were being torn apart from the inside out. No, it howled. This is impossible. You can't. But Elena didn't listen. She watched, unwavering, as the creature's form flickered, spasming and twisting. The energy in the room crackled with intensity, the very air vibrating with the shockwave of the failsafe's power. For a long moment, there was silence. Complete and utter silence. Then the creature, Peter, collapsed to the floor, its body slumping in a heap. The monitors around them went dark, the machine now completely still. Elena, Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. Is it over? Elena didn't move. She couldn't. She was still staring at the creature on the floor, her mind racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The stillness in the room felt wrong. Too quiet. The machine, the creature, the nightmare, it was all gone, but Elena wasn't sure what was left. Was Peter truly gone? Had she really destroyed him? She took a slow step toward the lifeless form on the floor, her chest tight with dread. Claire was still behind her, her presence a quiet, steady anchor in the midst of Elena's chaos. Elena, Claire repeated, her voice firm now, but with a trace of concern. We have to get out of here. But Elena wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Slowly, she crouched down, her hands trembling as they hovered over the creature's body. For a moment, there was only the sound of her breathing, ragged and strained. She stared at the empty, hollow eyes, the same eyes that had once been filled with warmth and life. But now, they were vacant. Dead. Elena, Claire's voice was softer now, filled with a quiet urgency. We need to go. We can't stay here. It's over. But Elena wasn't listening. She couldn't look away from Peter's body, the lifeless shell of what had once been her friend. What had she really done? Was this truly the end? Or had she simply unleashed something worse? The silence stretched on, heavy, like a dark cloud hanging over them. The finality of what had happened didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a question, an unanswered one. Because Peter was gone. But in his place, something far darker had been born. Something that would never die. Elena, Claire whispered again, a note of pleading in her voice. We can't stay here. We have to leave. It's too dangerous. Reluctantly, Elena stood, her legs unsteady, her mind still grappling with the weight of what had just occurred. She took one last look at Peter's body, then turned to Claire. Let's go, Elena whispered, her voice hollow. Together, they walked out of the room. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving the machine, the remains of Peter, and the nightmare they had just survived in the past. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. That somewhere, somehow, Peter's influence, his curse, still lingered, waiting for its next victim. And in the silence that followed, she realized something terrifying. Peter might have been the first, but he wouldn't be the last. Elena sat alone in the dimly lit room, the weight of what she had just done pressing down on her chest. The world outside felt distant, muffled, as if she were separated from reality by an invisible wall. She stared at the small wooden table in front of her, her fingers tracing the edges of a photograph, one that she had found hidden deep inside Peter's things. It was a picture of him as a child, smiling brightly, his innocence captured in a moment of pure joy. But that boy was gone. The creature that had once been Peter was gone, too. And what had replaced them, what had she unleashed, felt like a shadow that clung to the edges of her mind, creeping into her every thought. Elena? Claire's voice broke the silence. It was faint, uncertain. Elena hadn't even realized her friend had entered the room. She looked up, meeting Claire's eyes, but the look she saw there was no longer the one filled with hope. There was only fear. Fear for Elena. Fear for the world they had stepped into. Are you okay? Claire asked softly, stepping closer, but stopping short, as if unsure how close she could get. Elena's eyes drifted back to the photograph. It's strange, she said, her voice hollow, barely a whisper. I thought if I ended it, if I destroyed him, destroyed the machine, I could fix everything. But now, it's like I've only made it worse. I feel like I'm still trapped in that room with him, with the thing he became. Claire didn't say anything at first. She just watched Elena, her face filled with a quiet sorrow. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You couldn't have known. You did what you had to do. But did I? Elena's voice cracked as she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Did I really stop it? Or did I just set something worse in motion? The question hung in the air, unanswered, and Elena turned away, her hands trembling as they gripped the edges of the table. Her mind raced, jumping from thought to thought, like an out-of-control train. What had Peter truly become? Had he truly died, or was it possible that the essence of him, the idea of him, still lingered somewhere? She hadn't just fought against a man. She had fought against a force. An idea. And ideas, as Elena knew all too well, never truly died. They shifted. Elena, listen to me, Claire said, her voice gaining strength. You did what you had to do. But that doesn't mean it's over. It doesn't mean this is done. You're still in danger. We're still in danger. Elena whipped around, her eyes wild. How? How are we in danger? He's dead. The machine is destroyed. Everything should be over. Claire shook her head slowly. That's the thing, Elena. I don't think it's over. Not by a long shot. And I think someone else is watching. Someone who doesn't want this to end. The words sent a shiver down Elena's spine. Who? What are you talking about? Before Claire could answer, the phone rang. The sharp, shrill sound cut through the silence, making Elena jump. She walked over to the desk, her hand hovering over the receiver for a moment, uncertainty bubbling inside her. Don't pick it up, Claire warned, stepping toward her. We don't know who it could be. It could be. But Elena's curiosity got the better of her. She snatched the phone off the receiver, her pulse quickening as she brought it to her ear. Hello, she said, her voice shaking slightly. For a long moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then, a voice low, distorted, came through, sending an icy chill down her spine. Elena, it said, the name hanging in the air like a curse. You didn't think it was over, did you? Her stomach turned, the air around her feeling suddenly too thick to breathe. Claire took a step back, her eyes wide with fear. Who is this? Elena asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The voice on the other end chuckled, a low, chilling sound that made her skin crawl. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you've made a choice. You've set things into motion. And now, you'll have to live with the consequences. The phone line went dead. Silence. Elena stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to her ear, the weight of the words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. She couldn't breathe. Her mind was spinning. Live with the consequences. What did that mean? Who had just called? Who was that? Claire demanded, her voice shaking. Elena, who was that? Elena slowly lowered the phone. I don't know. But I think we're about to find out. She could feel it, the weight of something dark pressing down on her. She had thought Peter's death, his destruction, would be the end of the nightmare. But now, Elena realized, the real nightmare was just beginning. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, someone was watching. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?